I'm Oren,
And I'm Kerry Thomas Cody.
and we are the Skull Crawlers. And we ask you to suspend disbelief, the show where we invite you to open your mind and expand your horizons as we discuss the paranormal, taboo, and otherwise mysterious occurrences in our universe. If this is your first time listening or watching this show, we are two native filmmakers based out of Oklahoma City. I am from the Absentee Shawnee tribe.
And I'm from the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma.
And we primarily enjoy making films in the horror genre. We've been fortunate to be included in the Dead Center Film Festival 2 years in a row. We've hosted some community movie nights where we've had friends and fans show up and we all watch a movie together.
Yeah, it's a good time. We're just building a community specifically around horror, fun horror that we like. And every now and then we'll sneak in a couple of short films that we made, you know. So we just like to have a good time. So, yeah, if you're the first time checking us out, welcome. We're just some spooky boys doing spooky things, and we're also natives. So we like to incorporate our native culture into kind of everything we do, although it's not necessarily the primary focus of what we do. It is
It's in our DNA.
It's in our DNA. It's an entire upbringing.
Yeah.
Is that we want to bring the stories that we grew up hearing to life in different ways. But yeah, today we have a very special guest, and his name is Sterlin Harjo.
Yeah, Sterlin is if you don't know already, he is a writer, director, and creator of the FX on Hulu show Reservation Dogs, which you can catch the first 2 seasons on Hulu.
Yeah, and he's done a handful of indie projects before he exploded into the stratosphere with Rez Dogs. And, you know, it's really cool to see that he's been doing the film thing for, past 20 years.
Yeah.
He's been doing it. And it's so cool to see because we're pretty new to the film thing over the past couple of years. But we love it. We're obsessed with it. And Sterlin, who we met at Dead Center Film Festival, has had some incredibly inspiring things for us to hear.
Yeah.
And, that we're on the right trajectory.
Yeah.
We're doing the right thing. We're telling stories that we should be telling. And we're doing something different than what other natives are doing. And so that's just really cool to hear. Someone who has a show on, FX.
Which recently also is, #1 TV show on Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Rolling Stone. Like, it's cool to see somebody with, such great acclaim and, this reach, being recognized in general, I guess.
Yeah, it's really freaking cool, and the thing is, it's because we're so incredibly alike. Oren and I grew up in Tecumseh, Oklahoma, which is a 30, 45-minute drive from Holdenville, which is where Sterling grew up.
Yeah,
and so at some point we were growing up in the same place, and it's just crazy to think about. But of course, we're extremely similar. We share the same stories around the same area of Oklahoma. And so we got along great, and now he's going to come on our show and tell some scary stories.
Yeah,
we're extremely excited about it. Right on. How's it going?
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Yeah, man.
Just hanging out. Yeah.
Doing the thing, brother. What about you?
I'm good.
You traveling or what? What are you doing?
I got back from LA. I was there with my fiance. I went with her. She's got a film showing. Oh, yeah, that's where I met you. Her film was showing with your stuff. When she had an awards show there, which was nice because it's usually her coming with me to an award show, so
that's
I
cool.
could go and just act like an idiot.
No, that's pretty cool, man. Congrats to her.
Yeah.
Well, heck yeah.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing to do, to go and act wild, just be unhinged. It's such a weird. You guys are stepping into the weirdest industry.
Yeah, it's kind of scary.
Yeah,
it's a lot of people that are just pretending like they know what they are doing. And no one does, and so everyone's acting appropriate. And I find that myself, I want to just be really weird, in these spaces, just because it's all ridiculous, I think the networking side of it all is pretty ridiculous,
Yeah.
We went to this restaurant in LA, man. It was fucking wild. It was this Greek themed restaurant called Theta. And someone an assistant booked it to the person that was organizing. It was 18 people going to be at this dinner. And it was insane. because it was like a bunch of work people coming together like from all over. So everyone was trying to catch up. And this Greek themed restaurant was like, it was basically like going to like Mykonos to the club or something. Because it was like really loud, like DJ, like house music, like blaring, and I mean, you couldn't talk, and it was so loud that you were kind of like, man, like I don't know if I can handle this. Like, there were points where I thought I was gonna throw up. Yeah,
jeez.
And everyone was just going "Opa" and like dancing, and like,
oh my god,
portions of food brought out to you, and it's so loud. It's a club, but you're just sitting at a table dining. It was wild.
That's a whole different world for me. I haven't experienced anything like that.
Yeah.
It was wild.
So, congrats on your success of Reservation Dogs, being named top show on TV.
Yeah, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Rolling Stone. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been pretty cool. It's been a wild couple years, man. I mean, like, you sort of like always wonder, like, oh, what would it be like, you know, to go through this, you know? To have something blow up like that.
Yeah, dude.
And it's not, it's weird. It might have been weird, different if I was young and this happened. But like, I've seen a lot, and I don't know. I think also I'm native, you know, like from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So there's a perspective that you have that's like, not really believing the hype too much. And you just take it as it comes, you know?
I was going to say, like, it could be stripped away from you like any second. And it just sucks knowing that.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, there's I don't know, like there's I think that you have to kind of bury it. You have to like bury it, or you start believing it. You start believing it, and then that's where like I think things get unhealthy and you get weird. And you know, it's like this all could just fucking, you know, season 3 comes out and people just shit on it. You know,
that's true, because the expectations are so high.
Just think about like being on the Game of Thrones. Like,
yeah, true. Yeah.
Literally the best show ever happening. Everyone was fucking pumped. And then the last season, everyone was like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, you're shit. You know? And it's like, what about all those other seasons that you loved us? Like, fuck you. Like,
yeah, like those don't matter as soon as that last season comes out and everybody just forgets about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right on. So obviously season 3 is up next. Other than that, I mean, Oren's got some questions ready for you.
Yeah.
The thing that, I heard you talk about was maybe a Children of the Corn remake.
On your Instagram.
I always wanted to do that. Like, I don't know. There's something about that movie that was like haunting to me when I was young. And I remember, I think it's because I couldn't watch it like at first. Like, I remember my mom saying like, "Oh, that's devil worshipping stuff." Like, like, you're not gonna watch that. And I was really afraid of it. And then as I got older, I think I was in college when I watched it finally. And and like I was like a freshman or something. And no, I had to have watched it when I was younger because I remembered it. So I did watch it when I was young, because then when I watched it again later, I remembered a lot of the moments. Yeah. And so I don't remember what way I watched it, but somehow I got a hold of it. Maybe it was me and my cousins, because we used to have like horror movie Friday nights, me and my cousins. It was awesome, where we would go stay at my grandma's house, and she lived out in Spalding, Oklahoma. And you know, just Indian home out there in like middle of nowhere. And we would every Friday we'd go to the Holdenville movie rentals, and we would just go through the horror section and find the nastiest, scariest looking cover. VHS, rent that, and then we would go to my grandma's house, and we'd be driving out there, and there's a long dirt road to her house, like past cattle guards and all kinds of shit. And we would go there with her. We'd be in her car. She'd be driving. It's nighttime. We just rented the movie, headed out to go eat snacks and watch the movie. And this is what happened every Friday night. She would act like her car broke down on the dirt road. Like, she's like, something's wrong with the car. Something's wrong with the car. And we'd all be freaked out, even though we knew what's going. Like, after a certain point,
what if his time is?
And like she's acting like she's pumping the gas. She's like, I can't get it started. And then like the windows are down, and you're like parked in the middle of nowhere in the dirt road. And she's acting like it. And then finally it kicks in and goes, And then we would go to the house, and she would cook grilled cheese with commodity cheese.
Yeah.
Nice.
The best grilled cheese sandwiches on a cast iron skillet. And we'd have some sort of pop to drink. And we would put in these with a horror movie, and we'd all like lay around the front room couches or whatever and watch the horror movie. And she, all of a sudden, we'd hear a knock or a scratch at the window. And we'd hear moaning or something coming from outside, and we'd be freaked out. And then like somebody like open a window, and she would be out there. And what she would do is she would put a pantyhose over her face, wear some black dress and a crazy looking hat. She would crawl out her window from her bedroom, come around and like take her teeth out and come around scare us, and then we'd be freaked out. And she'd have a key to get in the house. She'd get in the house, chase us throughout the house. We'd be freaked out, even though we knew it was her.
That's so much fun. What great memories for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Those are such good memories, man. We do that every Friday night.
Wow, I love that so much. So obviously you have deep roots in horror. How important are those memories and those times that you had with your grandma and your cousins or whatever to filmmaking now? How
much did that like inform like the plot or like the story beats in Rez Dogs?
Like Rez Dogs, all of it. I mean, like basically what the feelings that I get by thinking of staying in my grandma's house with my cousins. And there's just something that happens when you're younger where like, it's just the natural progression of life where it's like everyone's there. You got uncles, great uncles, cousins far removed, everybody's hanging out.
And
then as you get older, they pass away and the circle gets smaller, and then you break off into your own circle, and then you start creating a new circle. And like I don't know, like so what I try to do, the feeling that I get is that same feeling from growing up in the country, growing up at my grandma's house, growing up, or talks about scary stories and medicine and all kinds of shit. That feeling is what I try to recreate on Reservation Dogs, just for me. Like I can, like everything that all those episodes have pieces of that stuff in there, and I try to it's almost like I try to recreate the tone. Like with Rez Dogs, that's the tone of how I remember growing up. Like the life that I grew up in,
I think you nailed it.
The world that I grew up in, like that's what I try to kind of go after, I think.
And so for listeners who aren't familiar with who you are, you grew up in Oklahoma and Holdenville. What tribe were you?
I am Seminole and Muskogee Creek.
Okay, right on. Orrin and I both grew up in Tecumseh, which is not too far away from Holdenville, Woboka area. And I grew up on this little plot of low-income res housing. We call it the IV. At least that's what everybody called it in town, the Indian Village. And there's maybe 200 houses of just like real rugged Indians. And we lived there for about 15 years. And that, I feel like what you created on Rez Dogs is so incredibly similar to how it was. I remember, man, me and my little brother, we were the white kids on the street because my mom's white, my dad's Indian, and we would get bullied a lot for being white. And, go to school, we get bullied for being native, so it's like there's no win situation there. And, man, we get picked on a lot, get into fights and stuff like that. Man, our bikes and toys would get stolen like all the time. If you leave them outside for, you run inside to grab something, come out, it's gone.
I mean, like, I think, we called it the village too. And I didn't live there. I grew up in a house the same though. Like, it's funny because my family always act like we were rich or not rich, but like we're fancy because we added on to the Indian home. We have the same Indian home, but it's in the country. And I helped him, but my dad knocked down the garage and made a big room.
Yeah.
Like the living room is now where the garage would have been. And knocked down a wall to make two bedrooms, one bedroom inside. And this is after like years of living there. And so like when people, I remember I had an uncle and brought his friend by, they'd been drinking. And I remember my uncle saying, look at the house, look at it, look close. That's an Indian home. And I'm like, wow. Because it has this like, but it's funny because like my dad never finished the living room. It was supposed to be a loft. So like there's all these like electrical outlets really high up on the wall for no reason.
Yeah.
That's great.
And but we had a village we would go to, and friends and family lived there and stuff. And I remember learning how to cook an omelet. My buddy JJ, we went to his house and no one was home. And I remember we were there and he was like, you know how to cook an omelet? You hungry? And I was like, I've never cooked an omelet before. How do you know? Oh, it's easy. And he showed me how to cook like a super basic omelet.
Yeah.
But like, I just remember like we walked around town. Like that was our thing. We walked every inch of Holdenville, Oklahoma. It's funny. I was telling somebody yesterday, one of the hardest hits I've ever got in football was in Tecumseh.
Oh, really? Wow.
Playing middle linebacker for JV. I think it was JV game. And I was like a freshman and I was chasing someone who was running around the end with the football. And I was not watching the cornerback. And this dude fucking smoked me.
Yeah.
It was like mid stride and it just like, I was like level. Like I probably would have like if it was a screen, I probably like floated across like this for a little bit. I just like landed on my back. It was like the first time I saw stars. I remember like from a hit, I just saw stars everywhere as well.
Yeah, I hated those because like you have to get up immediately and pretend like nothing happened. Like, yeah.
Pretty sure I'm still affected by that. I feel pain from it still. Jeez. Like it's a hit that lasted my life.
Wow. Good one.
All right, I got another question for you. So before Reservation Dogs, the only representation of Dear Woman in media was that terrible John Landis Masters of Horror episode. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't seen it. I heard
it's bad. But how important was it to you to show like an authentic portrayal of like Native mythology or lore or stories you heard growing up?
It was important for me to get it right, which I feel like getting it right for me meant not making this huge deal out of it. It's just, it is like presenting it real, like, there is this little element of like, is it real? Is it not? Because it's in Big's memory, but like, it was important to me to like Taika and I even talked about this where it was like, the way that mythology and like mythological creatures are treated in Native stories is just matter of fact.
Yeah.
And it's not like music doesn't swell and like, oh, here's the deer. It's like it's just like this is what happened. I was at a store and a woman had hooves and she gave me fucking toilet paper. After she murdered two people. And so it was important to treat it like that. And I kind of just came up with this idea of what if Dear Woman, like what if the Dear Lady had a purpose like this, like because I think the original purpose for Dear Lady stories was like trying to I think it was like a lesson towards promiscuous men, like don't be too promiscuous, you might get the wrong lady. But I was like, what if it's more of a revenge thing, like what if she is righteous and is like taking out bad guys. And then it's sort of this updated version of the Dear Lady mythology where it's like in this kind of post Me Too climate of like, her taking out, just don't be bad at bad, like, or you'll die,
vigilante.
That was the interesting thing about Dear Woman, the new, representations recently is like, was Stephen Graham Jones's book, The Only Good Indians. Like, it's like a revenge story, like, like you said, post Me Too, where like Dear Woman is presented as like a righteous, like, vigilante. And like, it's less about scary.
I haven't read that book yet. This one I haven't read.
It's not explicitly stated as it's Dear Woman, but it's like a shapeshifter that takes the shape of a deer.
It's I think an elk spirit or something like that. And I guess I'll tell you a little bit about it, but this group of young Indians, when they're hunting, they just like brutally murder this elk for no reason, just for fun. And then she
So
comes
there was a
back.
sacred ground they weren't supposed to go on there.
Oh yeah, and she comes back a couple years later
as they're older and they're men, and
yeah, and,
gets revenge.
And they get got. But it's really cool that he's out there writing stories like that, and those are the types of stories that I would like to.
Shitload of books, that guy.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
those are the types of stories that I would like to bring to the screen and to the page, because those are the stories that shaped me. You know.
Right. Well, there is, like I told you guys before. I mean, if there's any time, I've even told my brother this. My brother's really into horror. I'm like this industry is waiting on a horror script, a good native horror script, because it hasn't been done. You know, somebody's going to do it.
Yeah,
just hurry up.
I feel like
us. We out here. We're gonna be
hopefully.
And I feel like it's really soon. Like now, in the meantime, is really important for that because you know when say Rez Dogs is off the air and you know Indians aren't so hot anymore, then like are we gonna get these opportunities again? I don't know.
Yeah,
there's a horror show that I'm developing at FX right now.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about it?
Yeah, it's I don't know how much I can tell, but it's based on a book called A Promise is a Promise.
Okay.
Did you guys hear about the movie Switchback?
Switchback? No.
Slashback?
Is it the group of girls and the alien?
Yeah, Slashback.
Yeah.
And when did that come out? I was like,
I think it came out like recently, like within the last couple of months.
Yeah. The filmmaker Nyla, this is her project to sort of adaptate a children's book, which is like a creepy children's book called A Promise is a Promise. But it's not directly adapting that book. It is kind of modernizing, and it's cool. I'm developing it over at FX through my overall deal that I have.
I love that so much.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Can't wait to check that out.
Yeah, are you guys gonna film that anytime soon? What's the progress?
Not filming anytime soon. Like first, be writing it and stuff.
Oh, I got you. Well, heck yeah. All right, so I mean, the reason we're here is we want to hear some scary stories.
Yeah. What do you guys do usually? I haven't listened to your podcast yet. You have to. I will catch up on some stuff.
No, you're good. So
I've been
primarily
pretty
try to keep
it in season 3 lately.
You're a little busy, dude.
You're good.
You got an excuse. So we dive into paranormal, taboo type stuff, and we primarily try to keep it to like native culture themed.
Yeah.
At least we try to tie it back to native culture. You know, we'll tell a lot of stories within just.
I'll just tell you this though.
Yeah.
You're gonna love season 3.
Okay.
Awesome.
Just like from what your interests are, like where we're going is like you're gonna like season 3 a lot.
Well, I really like the Biggs episode, Big and Kirk Fox's character, the True Detective-esque kind of episode. Like I love that.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
That was the best one for sure. It was my favorite one. The catfish thing I was like, what?
Yeah.
What is this? It was bananas, but I'm here for it. I love it.
You gotta push the edge a little bit.
Yeah.
Wow, that was awesome. I mean, obviously you guys got Stiginis and I mean, we've heard a handful of those stories, but like really like any personal experiences or things that are close to you that happen to siblings or parents, anything like that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, man. Like, oh man, there was this story that's always great where my grandpa, way far back, I grew up with this story. So it was like when you grow up with this in your head, all right, so like I'm trying to figure out the way to tell it, because it unfolded like a lot of my family stories. I got more information as time went on.
Yeah.
And this story was the first time I heard it. I just remember always knowing it, and it was this idea that my grandpa had turned into a log to hide from U.S. Marshals. He was wanted for murder, and his name was Nogazi Harjo, or Nogos Harjo is what they called him. And I just remember I have a photo of him. Where is that photo? I have a photo of him somewhere. But he, I just remember always knowing this story, and I was always fascinated by it. And one time we were all at my house, and Nogos Harjo's grandson was my uncle Robert. And when I was like 13 to 14. I mean, my uncle was like 85. He was old already, you know.
Wow.
And so he was like not always at all the family functions, but he would sometimes be there. And he was there this day. And my aunt Georgia was talking to me about our grandpa turning into a log. And I was talking to her about it. She was like, you should ask your Uncle Robert about it. Like, he's here. Like, he saw it. Like, you should ask him. I bet he'll talk to you about it. And so I asked him about it. And he told me this story about, every morning. And, he was old, so he left a lot out. He was like, every morning, my grandma would wash my face in medicine and send me out with a plate of food. And I would take the plate of food and I would call his name out. I knew whereabouts he was, and I would call his name out, my grandpa's name, and he would come out of it, that's how he described it, is he would come out of it. And he said whenever they used to change like that, when they changed back, you can't see good. And he said, so he would point his gun at me, not knowing who I was, and I'd have to yell at him that it was Robert. It's Robert. It's Robert. He'd put the gun down. I'd give him his plate of food. He'd eat it, and then I'd take the plate back to the house. And that's what I did in the mornings. And he was hiding out, and they were searching for him. Wow. And so, like, an 85-year-old man's telling you that, you just straight up believe him. No questioning that.
Yeah.
And so years later. It's like, this is how like stories fill in throughout the years. Years later, my Uncle Harry was at the house and we were talking, and that came up again, turning into a log. And my Uncle Harry was like, well, that's where the scars are from his face. And he's like, those aren't chicken pox. And I'd always thought my Uncle Robert had all these scars on his face. And I thought it was like chicken pox or something, And he's like, those scars aren't from chicken pox. He's like, that's from. He's like, our grandpa shot him. He was like, so whenever one of those times that he came out of it, he shot him, and he had birdshot or something in his shotgun, and he shot him, and he said he turned and it kind of hit him on the side of the face right here. And he was like, that's what those spots are from. And my Uncle Robert was passed away by then, he was already gone. So it's just like another like a hole kind of filled in. And then years later, I interviewed my Uncle Junior, and Big in Rez Dogs is based on a lot of my Uncle Junior. Okay. And Uncle Junior, I brought this up, and he was talking to me about it. And he told me the full story, like he knew everything. And he pulled out this postcard that had a petrified log on it, and he said, "This is what Uncle Robert told me it looked like." He said it had rainbow colors, because a lot of times that petrified wood will, like the oil and light moisture will hit, and that turns different colors. He was like, this is what he said it looked like, except he said it was like moving, like the bark would move. And and he said that and they had told me, this is before. No, Michael Jr. told me this, that there was apparently an old Native woman as well that lived near my grandpa. And their grandma said that they would hear him. Him and that old woman would train each other. One would go out and change into something. And the other would go and try to find the other one. And they would do that back and forth to hone their skills. So my Uncle Junior told me what the story was. And the story was, my grandpa was a medicine man at a ceremonial grounds around Holdenville. And there was a point in time when the stickball game, where you play grounds against grounds, got banned. So right now, if you go to Creek ceremonial grounds stickball game, each ground takes a section of the field, and those ground members split up, and they play each other in that section. And then when it goes to this section, another grounds plays each other. And so they're going back and forth to the goals. but they get sections. And the whole purpose of that is too many people were getting killed and too many fights were breaking out and too many people were killed when it was ceremonial grounds against ceremonial grounds. It was too brutal. And so it was sort of like banned by, I think by towns, but also by the sort of collective ceremonial world, the Muskogee stomp dance world. They banned that. Well, these two young warriors come to my grandpa and ask him to make medicine on their sticks because they're about to go play in this game, this outlawed game. And my grandpa knew it was outlawed. And he was like, I'm not going to, because you're not allowed to play in those games like that anymore. And I guess they were kind of underground doing it,
Yeah.
And an argument broke out. They got really pissed. An argument broke out. I don't know if it got physical, what happened, but he said that they went off to argue, and my uncle Robert was a little boy, and my grandma Izora was a young girl, and they were on the wagon, and my grandpa. And so I think he took them guys away because they were probably being really, I don't know. There was an argument, and then he wanted to take them away from the kids. Whatever happened, gunshots rang out. And my grandpa, there was a fight, and my grandpa shot and killed these dudes, or at least one of them.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it was two or one. And my uncle Robert went to find them and saw one of the bodies. And there was and then the families of those two guys came after my grandpa. And he went to his house. And the story is, this is another piece of the story. The story is that he made medicine around the perimeter of his house.
Wow.
And he told the kids, if you go outside, don't go past this point. I can't touch you if you don't go past this point. And one of my aunt's Spot, there's another sister, she went out to get water, and people were standing at this perimeter, like trying to get her to cross it. And so anyway, he goes into hiding. He goes off into the woods, goes into hiding. U.S. Marshals are looking for him for murder. And they can't find him because he's changing into a log and on the run. And so finally, my grandpa decides to turn himself in, goes to trial, it gets deemed self-defense, and he gets off. And I haven't seen it with my eyes, but people have told me that there is an article that came out of the Holdenville paper at that time that says, man eludes U.S. Marshals by turning himself into a log.
Oh, wow.
Like it's a headline in a newspaper.
That's crazy.
And so it was just all these pieces of this story that like kind of were pieced together of this. And this story sort of branches into other stories, like my Uncle Junior was just a really interesting guy, like my Nogazi Harjo's wife. He told me a story of his grandma, which would have been Nogazi Harjo's wife, who made the medicine and washed the baby's face, the boy's face. It would have been his mom, actually. But my Uncle Junior told a story about being at, or maybe it was my Uncle Robert, I can't remember. One of my uncles was at the house and woke up, and there was this couple. This couple came to the house in the evening and brought this baby that they thought was dying, and it was really sick, and there was something wrong with its spine. And she sent my uncle out to get these certain plants, and she had them like make sure that when you pull them up, they come up with the root still attached. If that breaks, that's no good. And so he went and collected this stuff, brought it back. And, whenever we make medicine at our ceremonial grounds, the medicine man has a large container, bucket or whatever, clay pot, whatever. And they sing songs, and then they stir a certain direction, and they blow into the water. That's what their breath and their song and all of that and the motion that's what gives the medicine its power. And he said that my grandma, or my great grandma, took that baby and held it, and they were on the front porch, and she had a little coffee can, of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't have her other hand to stir and to do the stuff. So she would pour it in her mouth and swish her tongue around in the medicine. And then she would spit it on the baby's back and whip it with that plant that he had brought. And she did this, and then she would sing songs, and then she would do that again, and then she would sing songs. And he said that he fell asleep on the porch with her doing that to this baby crying, and like he said she did it all night, and he fell asleep. And when he woke up in the morning, he was on the couch covered up with a blanket, or in the front room with a blanket, and he said he got up and that baby was like totally fine. That couple was there. My grandma had made, or my great grandma had made breakfast. The baby was sitting on her lap and she was feeding it. And it was like, everyone was good. He was just like whatever she did that night, like healed this baby all night.
Yeah. So why do you think that in modern days, we don't see that type of medicine or those type of medicine people?
I mean, like people told me that we lost it, you know, and there are certain things that we can't do because we lost certain aspects of it, you know. But like weird shit has happened, you know. Like I remember one time when my grandma was passing away. So episode 4 of season 2, Mabel's house, whenever Mabel's dying, it's all based on my grandma's dying. And one time, and we were outside. I remember we were all sitting outside. People were smoking. We were telling stories. It was late at night. My Uncle Junior, who I've been talking about, was telling a story about one time hanging out at some house drinking, and these guys came in. And they were like all talking in Creek, and he said they kind of stayed to themselves though at this party, and he said their eyes were really red, like not just alcohol drinking red. He was like the whites of their eyes were blood red. And he said, my mom always told me that when you see people like that, that means that they've went out, and men have went out and changed, and they've been running around all night, like going crazy. He said, because the thing about changing is that once you do it, you have to keep doing it or you will go insane, and you have to keep doing it. And he goes, so that's what and he was sitting there, his back was to the trees out of the country. We were in a carport. He was like, and so that's what that, he said, I went and talked to them, and he was like, they were acting weird. And I was talking in Creek with him, and he was like, but that's what that was. He was like, all those guys had been out all night and they had changed into owls, and he goes, dogs. And as soon as he said dogs, I swear to God, 1,000 coyotes. It was like they were in those trees right there. It was like they were in those trees behind them, and they just like lit up, just screaming. Right when he said dogs, and he just stood there looking at us, and we're all like, he just stood there kind of looking at us, and then they stopped. And he goes, and you hear that? He goes, that just means what I'm saying is true.
Well, yeah, and they say like if you talk about them, you summon them to you, and so that could be an exact sign of that happening.
Right, we're talking about it at night, like out there like that, you know. It's crazy. Yeah. Also, there's a moment when Big comes in with a squash and hands it to Willie Jack in that episode, and he says, "Fuck, you want me to do with this?" He goes, "Cook it up, shit, it's organic."
Yeah,
that was an homage to my Uncle Junior. My Uncle Junior, one time Ryan Redcorn when my grandma was passing away. Ryan came down to the house to sort of pay his respects. And, you know, this white looking Osage guy shows up, like these creeks down in like rural Oklahoma, you know, Ryan shows up, and I see him coming in. My Uncle Junior's in the front room telling stories to a bunch of people. He's always talking with his hands and telling stories. And I see Ryan walking in or getting out of his car, and he had a fucking giant squash like this big. I've never seen such a big squash. He's like carrying this thing like this. He's like walking up to the house, and I was like, what the fuck is that? And he's like, squash. I was like, dude, you haven't met, because he knew my Uncle Junior, knew that he was real paranoid about medicine and stuff. And I was like, but he doesn't know what you look like, Ryan. I was like, when you walk in the house, don't say a word, just walk up and hand my Uncle Junior that squash. I was like, he'll be sitting right across from the door. And he's like, all right. So Ryan walked in, doesn't say a word. Everybody turns and looks, and he just hands my Uncle Junior that squash and goes, and then walks off and starts saying hi to other people. And my uncle's like holding the squash, like, and I just was watching my uncle, and he was like looking at it and like looking around. And then finally I heard my uncle go, "Hey," to somebody sitting next to me. He goes, "Why do you think that white man handed me that squash?" So I was like, that's why I put that in there.
That's great.
Yeah.
the episode on Deer Woman back in season 1, my family, as soon as it came out that day, we have this whole family group chat, and everyone was like, "It's Deer Woman, it's Deer Woman." We're like, "Oh shoot!" And then in that intro scene with Kiowa Gordon, that's his name, I think, driving that Camaro, and she's hitchhiking. She says she's headed down to Kiowa country. We all started freaking out because those are our stories that we tell around the campfire near Carnegie, Apache, Lawton area. And so I have a story from my dad's aunts, and I say this often, but in Native culture, we don't say great uncle, great aunt, anything like that. You would say grandma. So my grandma Carol, grandma Levon, and this was back in like the 1950s and 1960s in Kiowa country down there. And there's this haunted highway that attaches from Carnegie to Lawton. They call it the Gap. And since then, it's been redone. It's like real nice pavement. You can just cruise right through. But back in the day, it was like a real, rough, rugged gravel road, that type of thing. And so they're driving. Oh, and there are like stories like, don't drive through the Gap at midnight or past midnight. And if you do, don't look in your rearview mirror, because if you do, there's going to be someone in your back seat. Right. So there's a lot of people will go all hour out of the way to avoid driving on this road just because they don't want to, they don't want to encounter anything like that. So they're young, they're in their early 20s, and they're driving from Carnegie to Lawton, which is like the big city in that area. And it's at night, of course, and they're driving, and they see this hitchhiker, this old lady. She's sticking her thumb out, and one of them says, "We should help her," and the other one's like, "No, we should keep driving." But the one who was driving went ahead and pulled over, and they're like, "Come on in, hop in the back seat. Where are you headed?" And this lady, she didn't say anything, but it was clearly like this old lady with a shawl on. And she hopped in the back seat, and it was from what I remember, it was a 2-seater. And so the one in the front seat had to lean forward and let her out. And she hops in the back, doesn't say anything, and they start driving. And the one in the passenger seat was like, "Psst, did you see her feet?" She's like, "No, what?" She said, "She has hooves." And so they start freaking out, and they're driving, they don't really know what to do. And so a couple miles down the road, they both have this feeling, and they're like, "Okay, we got to pull over." So they pull over. They're like, "All right, this is as far as you can take you." And this is a 20 mile long highway that there's nothing, so it's like they could obviously keep driving, but they pull over, and they're like, "All right, this is as far as we can go." And she sits in the back, and then she climbs out, and they slam the door, and they just put the foot on the gas, and they start driving. And of course, what they say is, if you're driving through the Gap, don't look back. Don't look in your rearview mirror, because there's going to be someone in your back seat. Well, they look in the rearview mirror, and there's no one in the back seat. And then they hear that and they look to the right, and she's running alongside the car, and she's peeking in. They look over, and this old lady's looking at them, running alongside the car, going 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, until I guess apparently she stops. Yeah. I don't know, man, but that's one of those stories we tell around the campfire, man, that just gives us.
It's funny because Carnegie, the reason she's going to Carnegie is because my uncle used to tell me this story about they were hitchhiking, and this Indian guy, they were coming to Holdenville, which is the opposite direction of Carnegie, and this guy pulls up, and he's like, "Hey," this Indian guy said, "Hey, you want to go to Carnegie? I'll take you there." And they're like, "We need to go to Carnegie." All right. He's hitchhiking really far away from Carnegie. Yeah. And one destination if they wanted to go there. Yeah. It's like, we're not going to Carnegie.
Wow.
It's crazy. Yeah, because he's told stories like that and about that country, Kiowa country, and it just sounds like the hotbed for weird stuff like that.
Yeah, lots of Deer Woman sighting stories. There's obviously Bigfoot, little people. There's even a ghost clown who's seen hitchhiking along the highways over there. And I just found out about that a couple months ago when I was at the Kiowa Gord Clan powwow. My uncle was telling me stories of a ghost clown hitchhiking.
Yeah. I heard some crazy stuff. I made this film, this may be the last time, which is about Muskogee hymns. And I got to go to a lot of rural churches and stuff out this way. And just some of the stuff that I heard, like there was one church where they claimed that there was a striped panther, like that almost looked part person.
Really?
Whoa.
Yeah. It was like kind of it almost like had a monkey like being,
Yeah.
panther monkey kind of look.
Mm.
And they said if you see it, you die. And
Wow.
or you get really sick and die, you know.
Yeah.
They were saying that one of their groundskeepers had seen it. It was the last person to it. Throughout the years, people would see it, and this groundskeeper had seen it, and he got really sick and passed away.
Oh,
And
wow.
they were describing what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing out there. They call them demon monkeys, and they're like spirits or whatever. But they're like little like people, but look like monkeys, and they run around like monkeys. And they're spirits or something like that. But they only show up in certain places out in the country and stuff like that. Most people think that it's probably panthers because every now and then panthers are seen out there, and panthers sometimes walk like monkeys. You know the way that they move.
Right.
But that's one of those stories that I've heard out there that I'm like, yo, that is spooky
Have
stuff.
you
Man.
seen Uncle Bunmi? Who it's
That
like
was actually that was my next question.
Uncle Bunmi, who can
yeah.
recall past lives. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, my question was, you had mentioned that had influenced the season 2 episode offerings, where the prayer scene, where
Right.
like everybody just fades in, fades out.
Right.
What other films or imagery like that inspired you, like in making the show?
Well, Uncle Bunmi there's a couple references to that, which is one is the tall man Bigfoot character that we have, because he has these glowing red eyes, which are like these monkey beings that kind of Bigfoot monkey beings in Uncle Bunmi that have those glowing red eyes. I mean, there's so many references. I mean, like, you know, the way that Bear in the pilot episode floats out of his body is Rumblefish, shot from Rumblefish. You've got I mean, like in the last season, I mean, like there's, like you said, Uncle Bunmi, the way the spirits fade in. You know, I mean, there's just so many that I look at. I look at, like, I mean, like even down to like License to Drive, you know, like,
oh yeah.
There's a moment where Laura Dannon gets out of the car to say goodbye to in season 1, when she says goodbye to the coach, Tazba, who I'd told her about License to Drive, you know, like she'd watched, like, pick that moment, because at the end, he doesn't open the door. He crawls out and like is like talking to the girl on top of the car. And so Laura Dannon does that in the show.
That's awesome.
You know, I try and like, I don't know, like I looked at a lot of Kurosawa when I did the hunting episode in season 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the whole thing is just like, I mean, my writer's room assistant has made a list of all the influences that we talk about, and there's so many. I mean, like this, like this season alone, like I had the writer's room watch like Altman films. You know, we watched like, I don't know, like, Dazed and Confused, like, what else is there? I mean, there's so many that we've watched, like Tarkovsky, like 400 Blows was a reference. Yeah, I just like dump references out to the writers, and like this moment from like, this could be like this moment, or like watch this movie, you know, like everybody watch this movie as homework or whatever. So there's a lot of that happening.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, clearly influences kind of from everywhere. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's a good, fun format, you know. It's like I get to just do whatever, and I can break off, and like you'll see, like this season coming up is like, you know, there's some dark shit coming.
Yeah. Well, heck yeah, dude. Any last stories you'd like to tell? Any personal stories, experiences, anything like that?
You know, I mean, like there was like, let me think. I don't know. I mean, like you know, there's so many. Like I grew up with like, there was this kid that we always knew growing up. We always heard this kid could like communicate and talk with little people and see them. And he had these powers that he could see things. And we knew him by name. I knew who he was way before I met him. We knew him by name. Later, I found out that by my grandma's house, down the hill, probably about 50 yards, was my aunt's house, and who was also like a grandma to me. All of her kids lived there. And my mom and all them, my grandma's kids lived at the other house. By the time I was born, my aunt's house was abandoned though. It was empty and it was always scary. And they told us not to go over there and that it was haunted and there were things there, you got to watch out. And so we would scare ourselves as kids, right? Like we'd go fucking break in and like look around and shit. And I remember for years it was just like full of junk. It's like they left, just trashed and left. But then one year I remember it being clean. It was just like spotless. It's funny because I can't tell too much of the story because it goes into other people's in my family's personal life. But the reason that they left was something bad was happening. I'll say that. And my aunt, everybody told me this, but they said that little boy, they brought him out there and he sat on the car and was just like quiet and looking at the house. And at one point said, you have to move. Like your house is like on a ceremonial ground. Yeah. Like there's much medicine here. Like there's so much medicine on these grounds. Like you have to leave. And there's another haunting aspect to it that I'll tell you later when we're on the podcast. But I always knew this and I heard this about that boy. And throughout the years that we were kids, we'd always talk about this boy. We knew him by name. I knew his sisters and stuff. We didn't know, I never met him though. And then one day I was in a bar in Norman at the library. And the bar called the library. Yeah. And I was there and this Indian guy, you see an Indian outside of your element, you both nod. And he came up to me, he was like, are you Sterlin Harjo? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, he told me his name and it was this boy. He was older than me. And he was like, yeah, I'm from down there too. Like, I know your family, shook hands and whatever. Yeah. And we sat around talking, and we're drinking. And finally I got enough alcohol in me or whatever. I said, all right, I got to ask you about this. Like, and I was like, we heard our whole life that like you could see and kind of talk and communicate, or like you could see little people. He was like, it's true. He's like, I could. He's like, I don't see them as much anymore, but I still see them. He told me what they look like. He told me that there were good ones and there were bad ones. Some were jealous. Told me that, they would always try to get you to come with them, some of them, and they had satchels with shiny things in them. And he's like, they would always kind of show them to him. Yeah. I'm already feeling like I shouldn't be talking so much about this. But like,
that's what this whole podcast is. We talk about the taboo because it's like natives we're afraid to talk about this stuff, and these stories are going to get lost if we don't talk about it.
I guarantee you.
One time I was writing a script that had to do with little people. And I remember I was behind my house at my parents' house. And I used to smoke cigarettes back then. I was like smoking a cigarette, standing in the backyard. My parents live in the country. There's woods back there. So I was kind of facing the tree line. Yeah. And I was really into this film. I was like mapping it out in my head. I was like, I got it all, I got it all. And then all of a sudden, I felt this feeling, and I haven't felt this much in my life, but it felt like tons of eyes were watching me, like things were watching me from the woods. And I got this feeling. And then all of a sudden there was this other feeling that almost like spoke in my head that said, don't do what you're doing. Like plain as that. Yeah. And I stopped. I didn't touch that script after that. And it was good. Like whatever it was, I put it out of my head,
Yeah. Wow. Jeez. Ugh. That's spooky.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, right on, dude.
Yeah, man.
Well, we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
so much.
Thanks for being on the show.
Can't wait to hear more about that story when we're off air.
Yeah, I'll tell you some bangers off air too.
Yeah.
Sweet. Awesome. Right, so we're gonna go ahead and sign off.
Thank you for tuning in. If you like the show, please rate and review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, or your podcast app of choice. You can find us on Instagram at The Skull Crawlers and YouTube by searching for The Skull Crawlers Movie Club or going to bit.ly/skullcrawlers. And as always, sleep with one eye open because you never know who's watching.
And thanks for wearing your brown pants.
Good night.
Peace.